The Notebooks Collective believes that Black Lives Matter and acknowledges that as a virtual organization, our offices are on the unceded lands of the Kickapoo, Massachusetts, and Pawtucket tribes. Native peoples across the world continue to preserve and celebrate their cultures, and we encourage you to support Native writers and artists. Since our events are attended by people all over the US, we always encourage you to use this map that we'll put in the chat to see what land, native land, you are on. And the reason we're here together tonight is to celebrate Amy Hoffman and her newest novel, Dot and Ralphie. And so before I hand it over to Lisa, just remember, if you have a question to ask, you can also message us and we'll flag it for Amy or Meg. And now, Lisa.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lisa Allen, and I'm the other co-founder and director of the Notebooks Collective. And it is my honor to introduce Amy and Meg. So I'm going to start by saying that both Becca and I know Amy and Meg because we were students in the Solstice MFA and Creative Writing program, the program that Meg founded and still directs, and where Amy teaches and mentors. And at the opening session of each residency, Meg gives us a talk to actually all incoming students and faculty. And one of the things that she tells us is that we are all hopelessly intelligent, I think is my memory. She goes on to say that she knows this because she knows that we are insatiably curious about the world and about the people that we meet and the places we've seen and the places we want to see, and about words and sentences and poetry collections and epic novels and all of the other things that we're all curious about. And I'm telling you this because for so long, I thought Meg was just talking to the students, you know, the people in the program who are there because they want to write well and need to learn and they want to have their work in the world. I didn't really think about her talking to the teachers who the students thought, or at least I thought, had it all figured out, at least well enough to have published and to teach others how to hopefully do the same. But now that I've read Amy's work, both her memoirs and her novels, and Meg's work, her poetry and her novels in verse, I better understand that curiosity doesn't end when you finish a program, nor is it confined to the concept of genre. In fact, if you ask me, the very idea of genre is a bit of a distraction. There is truth in fiction and creative liberty in memoir. There is fantasy in poetry and criticism in essays. The thing is, writers write. They write because they're passionately curious, because they feel a need to witness, because they want to connect in a way they haven't been able to before. I don't know if that's why Amy started writing fiction after building a career as a memoirist, essayist, and critic. But that doesn't even matter because in her two novels, she digs into universal truths, identity, fidelity, family, aging, and so much more. In Amy's newest novel, Dot and Ralphie, her characters grow under our watchful gaze. They experience love and loss and are now at the point in their lives where they have to face the fact that they are aging. With the focus of so many relationship stories on the younger generation, or at the beginning of their journeys, Amy's focus on the later stages of a partnership feels radically different. A writer, editor, and community activist, Amy Hoffman is the author of the novels Dot and Ralphie and The Off-Season, and 3 memoirs, Lies About My Family, An Army of Ex-Lovers, My Life at the Gay Community News, and Hospital Time. An Army of Ex-Lovers was shortlisted for a Lambda Book Award, and both An Army of Ex-Lovers and Hospital Time were shortlisted for the New York Publishing Triangle Judy Grahn Award. Hospital Time was also in New York Public Library books for the teenage selection and has been adopted in college and university courses. It is the subject of chapters in several works of literary criticism. And tonight, we're extra honored to have Meg Kearney here to discuss Amy's new book with her. In spring of 2021, the WordWorks Press published Meg's All Morning the Crows, winner of the 2020 Washington Prize for Poetry, which made Small Press Distribution's poetry bestseller list April through September 2021, and was nominated for a Pushcart Prize, and was awarded the Silver Medal in Forward Review's Indies Book Award for Poetry. Meg is also author of An Unkindness of Ravens and Home by Now, winner of the Penn New England LL Winship Award, A Heroic Crown, The Ice Storm, published as a chapbook in 2020, and 3 verse novels for teens. Her award-winning picture book, Trooper, is illustrated by E.B. Lewis. Meg's poetry has been featured on Garrison Keillor's A Writer's Almanac and Ted Kuzer's American Life and Poetry series. and included in the 2017 Best American Poetry Anthology, guest edited by Natasha Trethewey. A native New Yorker, she lives in New Hampshire and is founding director of the Solstice MFA in Creative Writing program at LaSalle University in Massachusetts. So Meg and Amy, welcome to the Notebooks Collective, and the platform is now yours.
Thank you so much, Lisa and Becca, for inviting me here, and I'm so honored to be doing this conversation with Meg, really. We thought I'd start by reading a little section from Dot and Ralphie. The part I'm going to read is an excerpt from the beginning of the novel. The title characters, Dot and Ralphie, are a lesbian couple in their late 60s. Dot is a children's librarian. Ralphie works for the Department of Public Works. And when the novel opens, Ralphie is recovering from knee surgery. She and Dot are worried about whether she'll be able to keep her physical job with a bad knee. And their apartment also develops as a problem throughout the course of the book. It's on the 3rd floor of a Boston triple-decker, which means it has no elevator. Another character in this chapter is Dot's sister Susan, also a lesbian, who has a new, much younger girlfriend, Germaine, who is French-Canadian. On their way back from a 6-month anniversary weekend in Ogunquit, Maine, Susan and Germaine notice a sign on the highway for an independent living community for people 65 or better. They want Dot and Ralphie to consider moving in, and the 4 of them drive up to see the place. It becomes an expedition. For the first time, Ralphie manages to bump herself down the front stairs on her butt with hardly any help from Dot, which is an accomplishment she is proud of. It takes a surprising amount of arm strength. They drive around to pick up first Susan and then Germaine, who rushes out her door carrying a picnic basket. "For after the tour," she announces. "Darling," says Susan, "how sweet." "In the community room. I saw on the website. Very pretty and for all to use." "Nursing homes have websites," says Ralphie. "It's not a nursing home, it's a condo," Dot sighs, "and we're just looking, remember?" Germaine looks puzzled. "Everybody has websites," she says, "naturellement." They pull up to a low beige building, a shoebox basically, that matches those in the office park next door, except for the main entrance, an imposing pillared portico. "No, over there," Ralphie corrects Dot, who's aiming for visitor parking. Ralphie points her to the handicapped space in front of the door instead. "Hey," says Germaine, "not there. The disabled, they need it." "And," says Ralphie, extricating a permit from the glove box and hanging it on the rearview mirror, "I'm a cripple. That's why we're here, remember?" A woman comes out of the building, waving at them exaggeratedly. She's probably in her late 60s, just like Dot and Ralphie, but she looks like she belongs to another generation. Her body is sort of rectangular, and she's wearing a wool skirt, an actual hose, pearls, and a twin set. As they pile out of the car, the woman smiles broadly, her mouth outlined in vermilion. "Welcome, welcome," she calls. "Welcome to Maple Grove. And we do have maples, you know, quite venerable ones. They made sure to keep them when they built the townhouses. We're not like those other places, Mountain View Lakes or whatever, that are miles from any lake or mountain." She laughs at her little joke. "Our grounds here are just lovely in the fall. I always say, you can go leaf peeping right from your own kitchen window, while some people have to travel miles and miles." Susan introduces them. "Susan Greenbaum," she says, laying her hand on her chest, and then palm out, displaying the others. "Germaine Belrose, Dorothy Greenbaum." "Dot," says Dot. She doesn't let just anybody call her Dorothy. Ignoring her, Susan finishes, "Oh, and our Ralphie," as though everybody has one. "Ah," the woman nods, as though these introductions explain something. "Mrs. Daly." She extends a hand, and Ralphie reaches over her crutches to shake it. Mrs. Daly takes it, hesitantly. She's trying to figure out the relationships among this tour group. "Mr. Belrose," she concludes, "aren't you the lucky one, surrounded by all these pretty ladies?" Ralphie's been mistaken for a man before, and generally it's not a situation she wants her to get herself into. With younger guys especially, it can turn dangerous once they realize their mistake. She prided herself on giving as good as she got until the night when she ended up in the hospital with a concussion, a couple of black eyes, and 3 broken ribs. Never again, she vowed. She became expert at deflecting aggression with humor, and these days challenges are rare. Mrs. Daly, though, has handed Ralphie an irresistible opportunity, and she plays along. "You bet," she growls, trying for bustle. Dot catches her eye, and Ralphie winks. Against Dot's better judgment, she grins back. Susan glares at them, but keeps her mouth shut. Mrs. Daly leads them through the pillars into the foyer, Dot and Susan in front, Ralphie, who's positioned herself next to Germaine, following. Germaine finds the whole thing uncomfortable, having this strange man sidling up to her when her actual girlfriend has rushed off ahead. But then she reminds herself it's not a strange man, it's Ralphie. "Our front desk is staffed 24 hours a day," says Mrs. Daly. "Isn't that right, Cindy?" "Cynthia," says the woman sitting at the desk, who is dwarfed by an enormous flower arrangement. "Concierge service is included," Mrs. Daly points out, "by trained staffers like Cindy here." "Cynthia," the concierge enunciates, since this happens almost every day. Ignoring her, Mrs. Daly nudges the group along to their next stop. "Impressive," booms Ralphie. Mrs. Daly looks at her suspiciously. "We receive a beautiful fresh bouquet every week, Mr. Belrose. Just one of our lovely touches. Now let me show you one of our units." "Don't you love it?" Susan asked Dot excitedly. "All that parking and the grand foyer and a concierge like in France." She looks around for Germaine, but with Ralphie on crutches, they've fallen behind. "I could live here, Dottie, I really could." "In a unit," says Dot. "What town are we in again?" "Oh, please, it doesn't matter. You just shoot down 95 to Boston whenever you want." "I see," says Dot, nodding at this ridiculous statement. No one shoots down 95. Encircling a city famous for its maniacal drivers and irrational signage, including an Einsteinian stretch on this very highway where you find yourself traveling north and south at the same time, the road is clogged day and night. Mrs. Daly leads them out of the main building and across a short path to his townhouse. In the first-floor apartment, Susan admires everything, then reiterates to Dot all the features their guide has just shown them: the granite countertops and silent dishwasher, the waterfall shower head, and the gas fireplace. The view is just as promised: a rolling lawn and a stand of old trees, all of it cleverly landscaped to imply that over the next hill is a Thorovian woods rather than an office park. Back in the living room, Mrs. Daly stops her guests and arranges them on the armchairs and couches the place has been staged with, all of it unobtrusively tasteful, in neutral shades that can barely be identified as colors. She switches on the fireplace. "So that's it," she says. "What do you think, Mr. Belrose?" Throughout the tour, she's glommed on to Ralphie, having apparently decided she's in charge, and addressed most of her comments to her. Ralphie grunts. "Oh, enough already, Ralphie," says Susan, and it dawns on Mrs. Daly that she's made some sort of error. Susan turns to her. "It's gorgeous," she says. "We're going to have to give this some serious thought." Very good, says Mrs. Daly, less warmly than before, handing around her business cards. Do call, any of you ladies, if you have any questions whatsoever. The community room? Asked Germaine. Do you know where is that? We brought a picnic. I think they have them in some of the other developments, dear, but here we aren't assisted living, you know. Turning off the fireplace, she ushers them out of the building and points to a fork in the path. There's the shortcut to the parking lot, she says, dismissing them. We are in handicap, says Germaine, for Ralphie's bad knee. Mrs. Daly has been trying not to look at Ralphie, but now she does, and Ralphie gives her a big smile and a wave hello with her crutch. Same way, says Mrs. Daly. She's had enough of this group. She doesn't even know anymore who she's supposed to be selling to. Just follow it around to the front of the building, and you'll be back where you started. Exactly, thinks Dot. So that's enough for now.
Yay. Yay, Amy.
Thank you.
There is Dot and
thank
Ralphie.
you. Yeah.
I not only want to point to this cover, but I just want to, right? I want you to see that for a second.
Yeah, it's short.
Which I will come to a point about that in a second here. But first, thank you all for coming this evening. Thanks to Becca and Lisa for hosting this event and for your generous words and all your thoughts about the solstice orientation thoughts that I share every 6 months with everyone. It's always gratifying to know that some of that really actually sinks in with people.
Yeah, we take
So Amy, I'm really excited to talk with you about this novel. You know, I've heard that opening chapter a few times now, and of course I've read the novel, and it's just as absorbing and entertaining, and just so, you know, real life, you know, just it gets me every time. So I'm glad that's how you started. And as I was pointing out, this is a short novel. This is fewer than 150 pages. And yet very early on, I thought to myself how structurally it felt very much like a 19th century novel. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe I just read too many of those myself. But, you know, maybe I was making that up. But the chapter titles gave me the first kind of inkling or thought about that, you know. Each chapter title gives us a sense of what's coming, you know, like Ralphie gets a bad feeling, a favor for Jim's mom, Dot does her duties, sort of like 19th century writers like Dickens often did, you know, like chapter 24 in which Mr. Pickwick finds himself in bankrupt's prison and Sam Weller finds a way to join him there, you know. And then also the narrative is very straightforward looking. There's very little in terms of flashbacks or even backstory. And then at the very end, there's kind of a summation of what happens to all the characters beyond the book's close, which is also a very kind of 19th century novelist move. So I let out a hoot reading this when Susan, who has this very long commute all of a sudden down Route 95 from Maple Grove or Maple Grave, she starts listening to 19th century novels in the car. And I can't tell you how many 19th century novels I have listened to driving down Route 95 on my way to Solstice MFA residencies or just Pine Manor College and now LaSalle University. So then I thought, well, maybe I really am onto something with this idea. And yet again, this is not a sprawling 400-page novel. You know, all the chapters are very, very short. Some, you know, one page. There's one chapter that's a half a page. I don't think any are longer than maybe 2.5 pages. So I just hope that you could talk a little bit about the novel's structure and how it evolved.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly never thought of comparing it to a 19th century novel, to Dickens or George Eliot or anything like that. Because it's short. Um, it's it's not this. It's not elaborate. I mean, it may be like you, Meg, that I've read those books and loved them all my life, and so they're just sort of in my head. I have to say the chapter titles are really, really late edition. I mean, I titled the chapters, I think, just as it was going to press, because I thought it would. I didn't like the idea that the table of contents would just say chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and the chapter titles just come from the first sentence or two of each chapter.
Mm-hmm.
So it really evolved structurally. Also, I have to say I don't work from an outline.
Okay.
I don't know where I'm going when I start something. I can't even remember, to be honest, why I started with Ralfie on the couch. I know, I mean, the idea of that lesbian couple, of Dot and Ralfie, that's been with me forever. In fact, there's kind of a hint of it at one point in this story that I wrote years ago about going to the Michigan Women's Music Festival in 1978. And there's a couple sitting outside of their tent, and the butch character is wearing a sleeveless undershirt and plaid shorts and no bra. And so that's, they're sort of Ralphie and Dot predecessors, and that's way back. But I can't remember exactly what motivated me to start with that, except that my previous book had been rejected about 30 times, and I felt like I had no control over that. And I thought, I'll just start something new because I can control my own writing. And so Ralphie just came to me on the couch, or Dot and Ralphie, actually. I think the way I write is sort of intuitive, which is strange for someone like me. I mean, my therapist just told me this morning I'm a very pragmatic person. So I would think that I don't know, that I would know where I was going and why I was doing this.
Right,
and,
right. Or at least have an outline.
Yeah, no idea. Once I get started, I usually know, I have some notes and a lot of false paths and false starts. And, but it's also my process for writing the novels has been very different from writing the memoirs, which are also short chapters.
Yeah.
But those, I kind of wrote all these chapters, and then I had to put them together in some format that felt like it made sense. I did not write those from beginning to end. I think I may have thought I knew where I was going to end up with an army of ex-lovers, except that actually the chapter that I thought was, the section that I thought was going to be the beginning of the book ended up partly in the middle of it and partly at the very end. So the novels, on the other hand, I had the illusion, at least, that I was writing them from beginning to end. I mean, in fact, as I revised, things changed, and I had to actually add stuff to the beginning.
Really?
Yeah, because I thought, I don't know what that means. But anyways, it was just a different process. And I can't say very much about the structure that is anything thought out.
Interesting. Well,
I
that's
mean, that's just before we got together, I was just mentioning the author Kate Atkinson, who has written several very intricately plotted mysteries, but also has written some more literary fiction that's really fabulous, also very intricate. I don't work like that.
yeah, yeah. Well, it was curious to me too about the, the short chapters, and that's kind of how you work. And I thought as I was reading it, like if I were ever to attempt a novel in prose, this is how I would have to do it, And that's how I felt when I read Nick Flynn's memoir, Another Bullshit Night in Suck City.
Oh, yeah.
Also, every chapter's a couple of pages, maybe, that because we poets, everything it's all condensed, and so
Of
if you're
course,
going
it's
to
a
attempt
novel.
something at any length, if you can at least keep it in those chunks, it seems like I can get my mind around that, my writer's mind around that. But let's
Nick Flynn is also so interesting. I don't know if any of you haven't read Another Bullshit Night in Suck City.
so great.
It's great. But he also has poetry in there. He has a play in there.
Right,
He
right.
loves to fool around with genre a lot. And of course, he's more known, I think, as a poet than anything.
Yeah, and he's also writing screenplays, but I think you and he have a lot to teach those of us who are interested in kind of, breaking out from poetry and exploring another genre. So just to throw that out there for the poets in the crowd. But keeping with the structure theme, I'm also curious about the novel's point of view, because these days, we come across these novels and memoir from multiple point of view, and novels and memoir that feature, a fractured narrative, a fractured point of view, and people are saying, oh, it's a sign of the times, but again, this is a straightforward third person point of view. And I'm wondering if that was your strategy from the start, or something that you came to maybe after trying from multiple point of view, or even first person from one of the characters.
I didn't try multiple points of view. The point of view, or the whole novel, emerged from the first two-word sentence, which is, there's Ralfie. And it's funny because I think I kept criticizing myself for that sentence. I felt like, well, what's the point of saying that? But it actually, for me anyways, created this tone. First of all, it's third person. And the narrator actually, the point of view moves. I wouldn't say it was so straightforward, because it moves in and out of different characters' psyches. And in fact, I have two writing buddies, and one of them is a real point of view fascist, and he kept criticizing me for that, and said, you can't go there. It's not consistent, and it's confusing. And I did. So the point of view, I don't know what to call it. The consciousness doesn't move around as much as it did originally. I don't go into Susan's head, I don't think. But anyways, I loved being able to do that. I loved playing around with the point of view and the voice of this book. It was really fun to me, especially after writing all these first-person memoirs that were so agonizing. Writing fiction to me has felt like a bubble. It's a very different feeling.
So very freeing, you mean, in a way?
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Very freeing. Even though this, it's short and the chapters are tight, but maybe eventually I'll write a 19th century novel.
Who knows? Who knows? But
once I.
along those same lines, it's also present tense, which makes it feel like very cinematic, as if, the readers, experiencing what's happening and unfolding along with the characters. So was that also the structure from the start, or did it?
Yeah, I mean, that's
Sounds like it was, if that was your first sentence of,
I was
there's
going to say
Ralphie.
there's Ralphie again.
Right.
That's present
Yeah.
tense. And I suppose in a way, when you said cinematic, it kind of caught my attention because I've been told, I mean, this has never happened, but I've been told by many people, including my mother, that some of my books should be a TV show. Like an
Absolutely.
episodic
This
TV
could totally be,
And
weird.
yeah, my mother said my GCN book should be a TV show like Friends.
Well, these characters are keepers, and Ralphie is definitely my favorite.
Yeah, I'm very character driven. You know, as you can tell from the way I described the way I write. I mean, it all comes from the characters. It's not coming from a plot. That's
and are you able to write in short spurts too, or did you really need time? Like, I know you go to Virginia Center for the Creative Arts for some residencies there. Like, are you able to write like for an hour in the morning and then turn that off and turn to teaching, or do you really need the that time and space?
It's such a great question because until just a few years ago, or really until a year ago, I always had a day job, and I've always written exactly as you described it for a couple hours before I go to work.
Right, that's me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I'm a morning person. I feel very sorry for myself if I have to write anything at night. It just feels like, I just feel sorry for myself. My mind is not working as well. So, yeah, very early on, and when I started writing creatively, I decided I had to just get up early in the morning and write. And there were times when I hated doing that. And of course now I can't sleep, so I wake up at 6 o'clock anyways, even though I don't have to, which is sort of frustrating. But yeah, I've always, when I first went to a writing residency at Virginia Center for Creative Arts, which I've continued to go to, I was terrified because I didn't think that I could use the time. And I thought, I'd never had that kind of time, like just a whole day to do nothing but your work. And I was very surprised at how focused I was able to be and how productive I have been during those residencies. But in real life, that doesn't work for me. There's too much else going on.
Right. So you get a little bit of both.
Yeah. But I think probably most working writers need to evolve something like that. Some people write at night, some people write in the weekend. But virtually all of us have jobs. I mean, I think that's something my students don't always understand. That, as I said, even Toni Morrison was working at Random House through her third book. So
that's right.
Actually, someone told me that they liked about this book, which I felt great about, was that the people in it have jobs.
Yeah. These are people, that they live next door, or they're friends.
Well, they actually live in my apartment. I did a reading from this book early on at Solstice, and one of the students asked me where they lived. And I realized that their triple decker is my apartment, is mine. It's where I live. Except that right now I'm on the second floor instead of the third floor. I bumped them up.
Yeah, well, Boston and surrounding neighborhoods of Boston are full of those triple deckers, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah, it's very, it's the typical architecture here.
Yeah, even in the new construction. I mean, they just keep building those triple deckers, but
Yeah.
maybe these days they have elevators or.
Well, actually, finding an elevator building in Boston is a challenge.
I
We
believe
don't
it.
have a lot yeah, because most of the housing is, you don't need to put an elevator in, I think, unless it's over 3 stories.
Oh, see,
Yeah.
there's the germ of the idea right there.
Oh,
Um,
well, the germ of the idea actually, I mean, it's funny when you trace back all of the different things in fiction to like where this stuff came from.
yeah,
My upstairs neighbor, who is on the 3rd floor, was very, very sick, and she had leukemia, and about 10 years ago, and she had a bone marrow transplant, and she needed. So when you have a bone marrow transplant, of course, you have to be very isolated from everyone because you have no immune system. But she also had to get out of the house to go to the doctor like once a week, and she had no strength.
mhm.
Getting up and down, and she's a single woman. She had a great network of her sisters and friends who were helping her, and neighbors like us. Getting her up and down the stairs was an ordeal. It took 3 of us to help her to get up and down the stairs to get in and out of the house, because even sitting down, she couldn't push with her legs. She couldn't push with her arms. So that made me think a lot about stairs. And what do you do if you have any kind of mobility impairment and you live in a triple decker?
Right, right.
You're screwed. I mean, it's just awful.
Well, even when you're approaching difficult circumstances like that or difficult material, so not only in your novels, but in your memoir, one of the Amy Hoffman trademarks is your sense of humor. I mean, anybody who's sat in an audience at one of your readings knows that most of the time you have everybody, laughing when we're not, holding our hearts. And humor is not easy to do. It's really not, especially if you try for it. And I have the feeling that you don't, but I'm just wondering, where does that come from? How do you do it? How do you pull it off?
That's a question that I often get asked at readings, and I'm still trying to formulate an answer. I don't try for it. It's something about the way that I think. I think it comes from distance, being able to look at, in the memoirs, being able to look back at things that I experienced and kind of see the absurdity in some of them. And I guess that also comes into the novels as well.
Absolutely. Why don't you read one of just a bit of a chapter?
Sure.
Right?
I think you had asked me to read from the chapter called "A Favor for Jim's Mom."
Yeah.
Which I'm not going to read about Jim's mom, but what's happened at this point in the novel is that Ralfie has had to give up working outside on the truck, which has been a really hard decision for her, and she now has a desk job, and the job that she's taken is sort of handling complaints to the city. The Department of Public Works people call up, or you can fill out a form online. I checked it out. If there's a pothole, you fill out a form, and hopefully somebody comes and fills it. So things like that. So she's in charge of dealing with these kinds of complaints. So Dot says, "How was work today?" "Not bad," says Ralphie. "In fact, she's digging this job. Most of the complaints she logs are routine: a pothole, a broken street light, light an electrical short that plunges an entire neighborhood into darkness. But at least once a day, something interesting comes up. For example, graffiti. It's amazing what people write and where they write it. The latest, a landlord from Dorchester who called livid because someone spray painted on the side of his brick 6 flat, "I love fat femme dykes." "I can get behind that," said Ralphie. "What?" he yelled, outraged. "What did you say?" "Nothing," said Ralphie. "Keep your shirt on." "All business," she continues. "Spell your name for me, please. Address, phone number, address of the vandalized surface." She added a few questions of her own. "What color is the slogan?" "Who cares what color it is? It's obscene. I run a nice building. This is a family neighborhood." "I have to fill out this form, sir. Just answer the questions. There are many types of families." The man growled, "Not here. It's purple, okay? Very bright, 3 feet high, purple. You can't miss it. The asshole must have had an extension ladder." "And the spelling? Is it spelled correctly?" "You've got to be kidding. F-E-M, how the fuck should I know?" "You don't need to use that kind of language. I'm just trying to help," said Ralphie. "We'll send over a cleanup team. Unless you want us to fix it, tone it down a little, maybe redo it in gray. Are you out of your mind? If the tag is not gone within 14 days, you can give us another call." "I want it done now, today." "You and everybody else, sir," said Ralphie. "We all have to wait our turn in this world." So that's Ralphie at her desk job. That graffiti was on this building down the street from me.
Oh, for real.
I used to pass it every day on my way to work, so it had to get into a book.
Oh, that's so people, if you haven't read the novel, you can see why I love Ralphie so much. She's just so awesome. She just says it like it is. I'm sure this book is getting really great reviews and people are pointing out the humor, the obvious themes, you know, the indignities that come with aging, economic hardships and inequalities, and of course love. But it seems to me that the major theme weaving them all together is trust and loyalty, or in some cases lack of them. You know, trust and loyalty between the two main characters, of course, but also between Dot and Viola, who's, you know, has been her lover on and off, you know, and then of course Ralphie as part of that, you know, triangle there. Ralphie and the men at the Department of Public Works who adore her and come to visit her when she's, you know, down and out on the couch. You know, open up a 6-pack with her. I just love that those guys do that. Susan and Jermaine, of course, you know, her younger lover, and then Cynthia and Susan and that Mrs. Daly who,
Yeah.
you know, we meet in that first chapter, but, you know, is
She
kind
comes back.
of, yeah, she does. And then there's Viola and Mrs. Tran.
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, what in your mind was most central to you in writing this story? What was the real driving force?
Yeah, certainly you're right about trust and loyalty. I think that the thing actually that I've identified in everything I write is community. I'm really interested in networks. So, you know, like you were saying, there's all these networks of relationships in the book that develop, you know, between Ralphie and the people she works with, and Dot and the people she works with,
Right.
and how those people end up getting, becoming part of their lives. You know, they're not just friends at work. You know, they become really important figures in different ways, and which is too complicated to explain. But that's the thing; it's complicated, and I kind of love that. I have there's a bunch of people I know, friends, who have been meeting together, just very informally, and I just started meeting with them, and they're people I thought they were old friends of mine. And when I asked them, like, how do you all know each other? It turned out that, like, in this group of, I don't know, 10 or 12 women who live mostly in Cambridge, but also other parts of Boston, they go back so far, and it's partly a function of our age, of course. You know, we're all in our 60s and 70s, some of us. And, but some of these people had known each other since they were in their 20s. And the way that they described how these relationships had evolved, because some people had been involved with each other, or had been roommates, or had gone to the same karate class, or, you know, like, it was great. I loved hearing all these stories. And like I said, I'm just sort of fascinated by the way that our lives evolve together, and the ways that we support each other, or in the case of Mrs. Daly, don't.
Right. Right.
And, you know, the ways that we need each other and love each other. And I think that's actually the point of that last chapter, in which I sort of project everybody into the future.
Right.
That need and that love and that network sort of continues on and continues to grow and change. And yet people are still connected.
Absolutely. And that is like real life, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I have like a couple other thoughts, but I'm wondering, do you want to just read a little bit, another little section?
I don't need to do that.
No? All right.
No, I mean, the book is short. I don't want to read the whole thing.
That's true. That's true. Well, of course, Dot and Ralphie is your second novel, and I hope people will also read The Off Season, which I love also. And you and I have known each other. We keep trying to figure out how long. It's at least 10 years now.
I mean, I met you because I started teaching at Solstice program.
Right. Right.
That has been such a wonderful experience for me.
Well,
teaching. I'm not one of these people who feels like in front of a classroom is where I'm meant to be in my life. I find it difficult, but I've loved teaching at Solstice. I love meeting all the students, and I love hanging out with the faculty. It's just been such a positive experience all the way around, and it makes me feel like a writer, you know, especially when I was working full time and writing at 6 o'clock in the morning.
right.
It was a way to stay in touch with a community of writers.
Who keeps showing up. I see all you Solstice peeps out there. Thank you for being here. So of course, a lot of people in the audience also know that you write memoir. That's how we first got to know you as a nonfiction writer. And you write essays and reviews, and you're an editor as well as a teacher. And I'm wondering, you know, what has it been like for you to cross over from creative nonfiction, which you wrote for so long, into fiction? And how does like one feed the other for you? Do you see yourself going back to writing memoir at any point? Or are you just like hooked on fiction now? Or maybe you're going to write some poems, or, you know?
I don't think I'll be writing poems, unfortunately. And I don't see myself going back to writing memoir, although who knows? I've written, you know, short pieces, but in terms of writing a whole book, I don't know that I'll be doing that. You know, like I was saying before, I've really loved discovering that I could do this, that I could write fiction. For a long time, I told myself I couldn't, that I wasn't creative, and that I just had to write about my life, which was sort of a ridiculous idea for many reasons. You know, memoir writers are, I mean, we're all creative who are writers.
Of course.
The creativity goes in lots of different ways. I had a real ranking of genres in my head. I feel like the writer who taught me to stop doing that was Maxine Hong Kingston,
Mm-hmm.
whose memoirs are full of stories and even folk tales and bits of history, and she makes and she's written novels. She's also written a book that has some fiction in it and some memoir and some writing that she's done with a group of war veterans. I mean, she makes no distinctions whatsoever around genre.
Right, right.
Whatever works.
I was even wondering if you'd ever thought about maybe writing a novel that was set, in a period of time that you've written about as a memoirist, like during the AIDS pandemic, for example.
Yeah. I think it would be hard to revisit that in a novel for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's still, I don't know.
Yeah.
I've been very unhappy with a lot of the novels that have come out of it, so maybe I need to write my own.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think, sort of not where my writing is going right now. I mean, one thing that I am working on that's not fiction at all is I'm going to be working on an anthology. My very dear friend Urvashi Vad died of breast cancer in May. She was a really well-known queer activist
Mm-hmm.
who did a lot of writing and a lot of speaking and a lot of organizing. And I'm going to be, or I have started working with one of her sisters to collect some of her published work, and also her sister has been going through her archives and her computer and collecting some of her unfinished work. So we're going to be putting together an anthology of her work so that her spirit and her ideas can continue in the world, which feels important to me, difficult, but satisfying, I guess.
Yeah. And a good way to pay tribute to her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wonder if lastly, you might have just advice. I know I see a lot of creative nonfiction writers out there in the crowd. Advice for nonfiction writers who are thinking of maybe trying to cross over into fiction.
Well, I know you had told me you were going to ask me about advice, and I always feel hesitant to give writing advice because I feel like it's such, we all have to find our own way towards towards our work and our themes and our styles and what we're doing. But I guess the one piece of advice that I give myself all the time is, my slogan is trust the imagination. Like I was saying, I felt like I didn't have any imagination and I could only write from real life. And that was a ridiculous idea. And it was just a delight to me, actually, to discover that I could create these characters and that in creating them, they sort of implied a story, just in the way that you write a word on paper and it has vibes and it implies other words, and that's how.
Or two words, like there's Ralphie, right? There's Ralphie. It all starts with that. Yeah.
So I think for writers of nonfiction who want to move into fiction, they should just, like I said, trust the imagination. Understand that the ideas will come to you. And it's really hard to sit with that a lot of the time because we don't, or at least I don't tend to trust myself, and I don't tend to trust my imagination. And it was a long evolution to get to that point. And I don't think we're particularly encouraged to do that in our schooling or in our culture. So I feel like trusting the imagination is really increasingly important these days.
Yeah, and maybe being patient with yourself too, from the sound of it.
Absolutely that.
Yeah.
Absolutely that.
I wonder if there's any questions that the audience had. Becca.
I was looking and I felt like Anne Marie asked a question earlier on in the messages.
Can she unmute herself and ask her question?
Yeah, let me see. There she is. You asked something about tone, right?
Right. I was just curious about, it was something kind of fresh and interesting, the idea that tone might be a kind of point of view, that a tone could create that, I don't know, psychic distance or closeness, and that maybe that's part of the humor. I mean, I haven't thought this through very well, but
That's interesting.
I was thinking about Amy's remark about how she, she didn't think very much about her humor, but the tone of it is almost like a point of view, aesthetic distance or closeness. I don't know. Can you talk about that a little bit, or am I just making something up entirely?
I'm thinking though again about the humor question. I mean, so much of it just comes from real life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't make that up about Route 95 going north and south at the same time. I've been lost on that part of the highway. So that things are just there for the taking.
Mm-hmm. But there's a point of view. What I'm thinking about is maybe it's a kind of ironic tone that almost becomes a character unto itself. I don't know.
Well, certainly certainly, Emery, the voice is crucial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What you're calling
so.
tone.
Yeah. I think that's right. I think that voice is crucial.
That's always been important to me. Really long time ago, when I applied to graduate schools, like in the 80s, and Grace Paley was teaching at Sarah Lawrence, and I applied there, didn't get in, but she told me she liked the voice in my writing, and I've always carried that with me.
I would too. I'd be honored to carry that.
All about voice. So, anyways, I think that's always sort of where it comes from, is the voice. Maybe that's why those two words, "there's Ralfie," like launched me in this book, because there's a voice to those two words, as well as a point of view.
Yeah. I just saw in the chat, Lisa said, it seems to me that it's a special kind of noticing. I think that's probably right too. The particular way a person sees the world.
That's what I was thinking too, just like pointing out like the humongous flower arrangement, that kind of, hides Cynthia back there, and even like in your memoir, like when you're actually like quoting things that like your father said or something, you're selecting things that you instinctively know are going to resonate and make us laugh, but you're noticing those things, and you have a head for those details.
Well, certainly that's what writing memoir is all about, for me anyway. No, I just think it is. It's noticing and framing a story, because, and I don't know, Lisa's probably heard me say this a million times, she's been in my classes, but life it's inherently chaotic. There's no, there's a million different things happening at any given time, and what we're constantly doing, I think, just in order to survive, is telling us ourselves stories about it all the time, which involves selecting, what we hear, what we see.
Right.
It's not all coming in at us. And you could tell a story about the same event a million different ways. And you probably do tell it to yourself a million different ways throughout your life. So I think that's what memoir's all about, kind of that, creating a story out of something that's inherently sort of meaningless. Or just totally chaotic.
Not to depress everyone out there.
I love this inherently meaningless idea.
Well,
I think
For that.
I think I was going to add too, in talking about this, noticing though that like I think there's something that could be, I'm speaking off the cuff here, but like Amy, with your activism and your involvement in community, that you have to be observant and noticing of other people, because that's how, we work together when we talk to each other and we know what other people are doing. And I think that probably also plays into the skill in writing too, is being able to tell a story because you've noticed all these details from your experiences.
well, not just noticing, but like I said, imposing some sort of structure on
Yeah.
them that
Yeah.
they don't inherently have. I mean, I really believe that they don't inherently have that. And
I'm going to just throw out to the audience if anyone else has a question or a comment or anything that they'd like to ask Amy or, and Meg while we're here. Please feel free to let us know.
I'm gonna say that I have been in Amy's class a lot, and Amy mentored me at Solstice. And so I know that it's not true that she doesn't give advice. She gives really, really good advice. And
I can't help myself.
I'm putting a quote in the chat that she sent me during one of our packet exchanges when I thought that I had nothing to write anymore. And she sent this to me in a packet, and it's now printed out and lives above my desk so that I remember it. It's a quote from Annie Dillard about not holding on to things and writing,
Oh yeah.
and how the well fills from beneath when you keep writing and keep writing. And so I just wanted to say that it's inspiring to me to see someone jump into a new genre and to change things up when it could be very easy to just stay in your lane, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
I also want to throw out there that maybe you should write some poetry, because a lot of the images that you create with your with the way that you see things and the way that you structure them put me in the mind sometimes of prose poetry a little bit, with the imagery and the pictures that you create in the head. Like the entire time I was reading Dot and Ralphie, I couldn't help but think like I could see it playing out in like a Netflix special or something. Like it was very what is that word? Cinematographic, is that a word?
Cinematic.
Cinematic,
Well,
thank you.
that word, but
So, and I think
cinematic,
that
yeah.
I think that you allow these different genres to influence, even if you're not specifically poetry or screenwriting or that kind of thing. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to say. You do give
Well,
advice.
I do love
Good
that
advice.
quote. I do love that quote from Annie Dillard. Annie Dillard says, "Don't save anything. Use it right now. Don't think you've got to hang on to some idea or some image or some word to use later. Use it all." I think she's so right about that. And she gives a lot of writing advice. I mean, I feel I do give advice. You're right. I'm an editor, which is all about advising, telling people what to do, right? But and it's one of the things I feel quite certain about editing. I know I'm good at it, and I like doing it. I like playing around with words just about on any level. I mean, I like writing, I like editing, I even like proofreading. I don't like proofreading indexes or footnotes. I discovered that because I edited this book that had over 1,000 footnotes in it, and I'm never doing that again. But other than that, I do like proofreading, and catching little things and thinking about. And I feel like somebody so well from discovering their sort of strange linguistic and grammatical quirks, the way they structure their sentences. it's good to be a proofreader.
And you're going to make a great anthologist too, just, bringing all that, all those skills to that project. So
Well,
I
it's
hope you're
funny.
going to let everybody know about it.
I realized this morning that I wanted to mention it because I was thinking of it as something that was not part of my writing life, but of course it's part of my writing life. So
Yeah. It's a huge thing to take on too. So
yeah. Well, I don't know. In some ways I feel like I have to do it, like I'm the person who needs to do it. I've got the publishing contacts and I know
Yeah.
how to do this stuff. So I'm doing it. We'll see how it goes.
Any last questions out there?
Can you talk about the anthology project?
Well, as I mentioned, it's an anthology of work by my late friend Ralfie. She published a book called Virtual Equality, and it's from 1995. And originally, several of her friends. Yeah, thank you, Becca. Becca put up the obit from the Times, which tells you a lot about her. Originally, a lot of people who were close to her wanted to get Virtual Equality republished. So that was the first thought. And so I reread it. It's like 400 pages long. By the end, I have to say it gets repetitive. It's very dense. And so I suddenly had this stroke of genius that instead of republishing this whole book, we should republish an anthology with sections of it that also includes some of her speeches, some of her essays that are more recent. This was published in 1995. She had a lot to say about things that have happened since then. And as I said, I think her sister has been going through all of her papers and computer and finding all kinds of unpublished manuscripts, as well as a proposal for a Netflix special. I mean, she was all over the place. I don't think we're going to be publishing that, but it was very cool to hear that she'd been working on that. Anyways, it's for me personally, it's a way of, I think, as Meg said, of memorializing her and keeping her work out there. And she was somebody who inspired a lot of people, so hopefully that will continue through the book.
Absolutely. I think that's a beautiful note to end on. I think this idea of using writing to anthologizing to pay tribute to someone. Lisa, do we have any closing remarks? I think first what we should do is unmute and give Amy and Meg a round of applause for such a lovely, lovely event. Yes. And then
I'm sorry, Becca. So my only thoughts are please go buy Amy's books and please go buy Meg's books and request them at your library and share them with friends and go out and do what you're doing now and support other writers and other creatives, because I think that's how we keep our work in the world. We also, the Notebooks Collective sends out an email with information. We are also probably most active on Twitter. We try to be a little active on Facebook and Instagram, but probably not as much. So we would love if you would follow us there. And we are always, always, always interested in hearing what you think and getting feedback about what could be better, what doesn't work, what works. So feel free to email us through the website and share your thoughts, because we think that's a good way to grow and we would like to do that. So I think that's all that we have to say. This video will be up on YouTube at some point where you can watch it again and again. Other than that, thank you everybody for being here and good night.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks again to Becca and Lisa for this
So much.
wonderful
Meg.
organization that you've created and how you support fellow artists.
Yes.
Thanks, Meg.
It's such a great, I mean, I love doing it because of what we can provide for other people, but I also love it because I get to sit in on all of these.
Yeah.
And I get to hear and learn and
Right.
discover new things. So
What she said.
yeah. So thank you all for coming, and we hope that you have a great evening. Bye, Beth.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you so much. Bye bye.